The Guardian arrived in the docking bay like a shadow of its former self, a massive, multi-limbed alien entity whose armor had been shattered in the fires of battles no one remembered and whose limbs trembled with the agony of wounds deemed irreparable. The station lights glinting off cracked exoskeleton and exposed tissue in a way that made every observer recoil and whisper numbers and calculations as if life itself could be reduced to credit, liability, and risk assessment. The corporate overseers had already marked it as defective, a liability to be eliminated, a failed investment that would only take up space and resources, and they stood back with satisfaction, expecting the hum of engines and the cold, precise routine of the station to deliver their verdict, that it would die and that the universe would be cleaner, more efficient for it. But the humans, small, unassuming, and countless in their seeming insignificance, did not see this guardian as a commodity. One human, young, slight, yet unshakably determined, stepped forward while alien voices hissed and snickered, questioning the logic of touching, feeding, or attempting to heal what they had already counted as lost. The human's hands, steady and careful, moved over the fractured armor, over twisted joints and shattered limbs, applying balms, salves, and tender adjustments with a patience that alien minds found incomprehensible, a deliberate rhythm of touch and presence that was not designed for efficiency but for empathy, that did not calculate value but restored dignity. The Guardian flinched violently at first, eyes clouded with pain and distrust, claws clattering against the floor in spasms of reflexive terror, but the human remained unflinching, speaking softly in a cadence designed not to command, but to soothe, to promise, to anchor it to the possibility of care. Days blurred into nights, and nights into weeks, and each hour was a study in perseverance. A limb lifted fractionally without pain, a flicker of recognition passed across multifaceted eyes, the tremor of fear eased into curiosity, and slowly, subtly, the Guardian began to trust, not out of obedience, but from repeated evidence that someone would not leave, would not measure its worth in credits, would not abandon it when survival seemed unlikely. The station buzzed around them with the indifferent hum of commerce, the clanging of tools, and the constant calculation of alien minds, but in their quiet corner, time moved differently. The human read aloud stories of distant planets, of creatures that thrived through cooperation rather than conquest, of choices made not for profit, but for survival, for loyalty, for love. And the Guardian listened, its massive body trembling less, its attention turning toward the voice, its consciousness absorbing not instruction, but example. Aliens watched with increasing discomfort, some stepping closer with instruments of enhancement or chemical stimulants, insisting that the Guardian could recover faster if treated scientifically, more efficiently, more rationally. But the human's refusal was calm, resolute, unshakable. The Guardian would heal not according to alien design, but according to its own pace, its own body, its own mind, guided by patience, care, and respect for its autonomy. And in this slow rhythm, miracles unfolded. Muscles that had atrophied began to flex again, limbs that had been twisted learned to coordinate. The Guardian's breathing, once shallow and ragged, deepened with strength, and through it all, the human never demanded gratitude, never sought control, never measured progress by the station's artificial standards, only by the subtle signs of trust, a gaze that lingered, a limb that extended, a vibration that indicated acknowledgement rather than instinct. Weeks became months, and the bond between human and Guardian deepened with a quiet intensity that the station could not compute. The alien overseers whispered among themselves, their superior intellects failing to grasp the phenomenon before them. A being previously discarded, deemed useless, was thriving because of human persistence, and not under coercion, but through the unassailable power of care, patience, and love. Slowly, the Guardian began to exhibit behaviors that no alien experiment could have anticipated. Deliberate movements, gentle testing of strength, small gestures of attention toward the human that were chosen rather than compelled, each one reinforcing a growing awareness of autonomy, trust, and partnership. The human and the Guardian spent nights together in the dim glow of the station's neon and the distant shimmer of stars, breathing in sync, leaning into one another in ways that no words could capture, demonstrating to the universe that loyalty and family could not be bought, could not be forced, and could not be measured in profits. Small victories compounded into larger ones. The Guardian learned to navigate the station's corridors, coordinate multiple limbs without pain, anticipate the human's movements, and even respond to environmental hazards with judgment that indicated comprehension rather than reflex, choice rather than instinct. And yet the aliens remained skeptical, dismissive, mocking, their conversations laced with derision. It will never be whole. It will always be defective. But they were wrong, and the slow unfolding of care, attention, and trust began to show in ways subtle and profound. The Guardian now moved with coordination, flexing its massive limbs with power returning, observing its environment with awareness, leaning toward the human's presence with intention, and occasionally, in moments of quiet, pressing its head or hand or shoulder in a gesture of recognition and bond that the aliens could not interpret and could not control. And the human, ever steady, never rushed the process, never imposed a schedule, never demanded repayment for time or attention, knowing that the true measure of healing was not speed, but depth, not obedience, but understanding, not strength, but wisdom. And through months of repetition, gentle insistence, and unwavering presence, the Guardian transformed in body, mind, and spirit, evolving from a discarded, defective entity into a being capable of choice, capable of loyalty, capable of acting not from fear, obligation, or profit, but from trust and recognition, a living testament to the quiet but unbreakable power of humanity. The station itself seemed to acknowledge this shift, if subtly. Lights reflected differently off the Guardian's healed armor. Shadows of movement conveyed strength where once there was only weakness, and the air carried a tension that spoke of something greater than transactions, credits, and contracts. It spoke of connection, choice, and the awakening of a bond that would soon be tested in ways that no one could predict. And so the months continued, the Guardian's body regaining strength, its mind sharpening, its awareness deepening, each day a careful negotiation between freedom and recovery, fear and trust, independence and companionship, while the human remained a steady presence, a guide without coercion, a constant affirmation that life, even when broken, could grow, could choose, could be whole, and that in the universe's cold calculations, one truth remained undeniable. The patient persistence of humanity could restore what the corporate machine had abandoned, could awaken loyalty where none existed, and could teach even the strongest, most fearsome beings that freedom of choice, respect, and compassion were the greatest powers of all.
The station's calm, once broken only by the quiet hum of machinery and the careful rhythm of human care, was shattered the instant the corporate vessels cut through the void outside, their hulls sleek and glinting, engines thrumming with authority, the weight of command and profit filling the air with a palpable tension that seemed to press against walls, ceilings, and every living thing inside. The humans and the Guardians sensed the shift immediately, the vibration of pressure, the subtle change in light, the sound of disciplined alien movement, and the unmistakable calculation of a species that believed control could be enforced through credit, threat, and machinery. The corporate representatives arrived, projecting hollow images that radiated cold efficiency, their faces a mask of expectation, their voices slicing through the docking bay with transactional authority, offering credits, upgrades and threats alike, claiming ownership over the Guardian, insisting that months of care meant nothing, that the law of commerce and contract demanded obedience, that loyalty to a human was irrelevant when profit could be demanded and enforced. The human, small and steady beside the Guardian, said nothing, his calm a silent affirmation of what the corporate emissaries could not calculate, the power of choice. The Guardian, once broken and trembling, now coiled its limbs with the strength and precision of months of careful rehabilitation, claws scraping lightly against the metallic floor, muscles rippling beneath scarred armor, eyes narrowing not in fear but in recognition, assessment, and intention, and the air seemed to thicken, charged with anticipation, as the station itself seemed to hold its breath in recognition of a moment that no alien ledger could predict. The corporates advanced, instruments of coercion and chemical stimulants in hand, expecting compliance, yet the Guardian responded not with panic or reflex, but with deliberate awareness, pressing closer to the human, positioning its massive form protectively, a silent declaration that it would act not according to contract, not according to threat, but according to choice, loyalty, and the lessons it had learned through patient human care. Time slowed as the confrontation unfolded. Voices, holograms, gestures, and threats washed over them, but the Guardian's movements were measured, deliberate, and unwavering, and every subtle action, the tilt of a head, the extension of a limb, the press of a forehead against the human's hand, conveyed a depth of trust and a declaration of agency that left the corporate observers stunned, unable to reconcile their cold calculations with the living proof before them that choice, once nurtured, could not be bought or coerced. And then, as if the very universe acknowledged the truth of what had been built over months, the Guardian stepped forward, massive limbs flexing with controlled strength, eyes fixed on the human in a moment of unspoken affirmation, and the human extended his hand, not as a command, but as an invitation, a gesture of trust and partnership, and the Guardian responded, pressing its head to his palm, signaling not fear, not obedience, but an active decision, a conscious declaration that it had chosen family over profit, loyalty over contract, compassion over coercion. The corporate emissaries recoiled, stunned into silence by a reality their logic could not account for, and their words faltered, promises and threats meaningless against the simple, undeniable power of trust earned and freely given. And then, the crisis that had loomed over the station became clear. Systems failing, alarms echoing, cargo lifts malfunctioning, security protocols compromised, and the alien guardians sent to enforce compliance now hesitated because one guardian, once discarded and deemed useless, had learned the most essential lesson the corporate world could not calculate, that strength, loyalty, and courage could not be purchased, that a bond forged through care and patience could surpass all authority, and that the true power of humanity was in teaching life to choose, to protect, and to act for the sake of others. The Guardian, fully healed in body and spirit, moved decisively, positioning itself between the humans and the threat, limbs coiling, claws scraping with authority, eyes blazing with awareness, and in every motion it declared that it would defend, not follow orders, that it would act not as a commodity, not as property, not as a tool, but as a living being capable of choice, courage, and loyalty. And the human stood beside it, hand lightly resting on massive limb, a quiet affirmation that the months of care, patience, and compassion had borne fruit beyond prediction, that the Guardian had learned to act not from coercion or instinct, but from trust and recognition, and that the universe itself would remember this moment as proof that humanity's strength lay not in numbers or weapons, but in the patient, persistent, unwavering willingness to nurture, guide, and respect life. And as the conflict reached its apex, the corporate emissaries realized their calculations had failed. Threats, credits, and devices meant to coerce compliance now meant nothing, for they had not accounted for the bonds formed through months of dedication, the lessons taught in silence and presence, and the truth that the Guardian now embodied fully, that choice is a power greater than any weapon, that loyalty is forged through care rather than fear, and that the quiet, persistent insistence of humanity can awaken strength, courage, and wisdom where the cold universe had only seen brokenness. And in the aftermath, when the corporate ships departed, defeated by a reality they could not understand, the Guardian and the humans moved through the station not as master and tool, not as property and keeper, but as companions, allies, and family. The scars of past battles healed yet visible, the lessons of months of care etched into every motion, every gesture, every glance, and the station itself seemed to acknowledge a new order, that compassion and patience are forces the universe cannot calculate, that choice is the truest measure of strength, and that humanity, in its quiet, relentless way, had transformed a being once discarded into a legendary guardian capable of defending, loving, and inspiring in ways no alien logic could ever predict. And in that glow of triumph and calm, the humans and the Guardian shared quiet moments of reflection, soft vibrations of trust, gentle touches, shared stories, and the serene knowledge that what had once been broken was now whole, that freedom had been taught and embraced, that loyalty could not be bought, and that in the vast, indifferent galaxy, humanity had proven its most essential truth, that the greatest power is patience, the deepest strength is compassion, and the most enduring legacy is the bonds we choose to forge.